Hello and welcome to Good or Bad. I was hoping you could help me solve the mother of all riddles. What were they thinking? Batman Forever, released in 1995, was the first movie in this continuity to not be directed by Tim Burton. Instead, in came Joel Schumacher as the director, but Burton still served as producer. And maybe that's what saved this movie from being completely awful. Instead, it was just partially bad. What I liked about this movie was Val Kilmer's performance as Bruce Wayne and Batman. Granted, he's not as good as Michael Keaton, at least in my opinion, but to be fair, he didn't have a really good script to work with.
Can I persuade you to take a sandwich with you, sir?
I'll get drive-through.
With this movie being Schumacherized instead of Burtonerized, those are technical terms by the way, the designs are much less gothic than they were in the two Burton movies, so let's take a look at them. The Batcave looks okay, a bit empty but still okay. The Batmobile looks like it's from Hot Wheels and the Batsuit has nipples. I'm not joking, look, bat nipples. Aside from that though, the Batsuit looks good, except for the Sona Batsuit, that just looks silly. This movie explores Bruce Wayne's psyche much more than the first two ever did. Throughout the movie, Bruce suffers through bad dreams of his parents' deaths, but more so the funeral and him discovering what would become the Batcave. And this is a really good scene. In fact, I would argue it's much more character building and gives us a better idea of what's going on in Batman's head than either of the movies before. Bruce has always had nightmares about the night his parents were killed, but in this movie it was so much worse and vivid because he witnessed the death of Dick Grayson's parents, which brings us to Robin. Chris O'Donnell enters the fray as Dick Grayson, who would later in this movie become Robin, Batman's famous sidekick. One of the most common complaints about O'Donnell as Robin, in this movie at least, is the fact that he is way too old, and I agree, but not for the reasons most die-hard comic fans have. Which would probably be that in the comics Grayson was a kid, around 8 years old when his parents were murdered, and also around the same age when he became Robin. And I would just like to take this opportunity to say that I always thought the fact that Batman dragged this 8 to 10-year-old along with him to fight crime was questionable, to say the least. But I digress. This version of Robin is obviously much older. I'm not sure, but I think the movie would have the character around age 17, but he clearly looks mid-20s. So as tragic as anyone's parents being murdered is, it just felt off that Bruce would connect so strongly with it. I mean, in the comics it made sense because Dick Grayson was the same age as Bruce was when his parents were murdered. So it made sense that it had the whole history repeating feel to it, and Bruce felt the need to take him in. But here, Dick Grayson was pretty much an adult when it happened. After Grayson stumbles onto the fact that Bruce Wayne is Batman, he wants Batman's help to get revenge on TwoFace for killing his parents. And after a lecture from Bruce about why killing TwoFace for revenge isn't worth it, they shake hands and become partners. I have to admit that scene where Bruce gives him that talk is really good. And I think it works because it doesn't come from a moral standpoint, instead it comes from his previous experiences. Because his parents were killed by a younger version of the Joker, which he later got revenge for in the form of killing Joker in the first movie. So it all felt like a don't make my mistakes kind of speech, rather than a it's just not the right way kind of thing, which we would usually hear from Batman. But let's move on to the villains of this movie. Harvey Dent, aka Two-Face, is played by Tommy Lee Jones, but I think he thought he was playing a poorly written version of the Joker when really he was playing a poorly written version of Two-Face. I mean, all that laughter, since when did Two-Face taunt and laugh that much?
Yes! Yes, 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 oh, happy day! Farewell forever to that pointy-eared night rat! Something like a bad case of gas!
His backstory is that after he had plastic surgery to change his face in between movies, Dent was the district attorney and he was taking on the Maroney crime family and got half his face covered in acid for his trouble. Look at that, Batman was in the courtroom. It's just so funny to imagine Batman, the Dark Knight, sitting in a courtroom. Anyway, the acid scarred half his face, giving him split personality, and in some iterations that's what caused the personality disorder, but in others he always had split personalities before, but the scarring exacerbated it. This movie doesn't tell us which it was, so I'm just going to go ahead and say flip a coin to decide. Okay, that was bad. I'm sorry. After that, he became the criminal known as Two-Face, who only made decisions based on a coin flip, even if he had to repeatedly flip the coin to reach the decision he wanted. Which kind of defeats the purpose. All Two-Face wants in this movie is to kill Batman. Well, there's an interesting villain for you. He makes several attempts at this, such as staging a bank robbery, pretending to be an old lady, and threatening to detonate a bomb at a circus unless Batman reveals his identity, which is what kills Robin's parents. But naturally, he never gets even close to achieving his goal. That is, until Edward Nygma comes along, also known as the Riddler, played by Jim Carrey, and, well, Jim Carrey is just playing Jim Carrey. That's it, it's just another Jim Carrey performance. If you like the usual goofy Jim Carrey kind of thing, you'll probably love his Riddler performance. Joygasm! I see a lot of people who seem to think that the Riddler is just a Joker clone, and he really isn't. I mean, the Joker is out to cause chaos and break Batman's spirit, but the Riddler is out to prove his supposedly superior intellect on the rest of Gotham, and of course Batman. He commits crimes while leaving riddles that will lead to his whereabouts or how to stop him, but he thinks if he manages to do that and they don't work it out, it proves that he is better than them. Riddler's backstory in this movie was that he worked in the R&D department at Wayne Enterprises, and he was creating a device that could input thoughts into the mind and extract them. Bruce didn't like this and said it just raises too many questions. This made Nygma snap and kill his supervisor, and then obsess over Bruce Wayne. He left multiple riddles for Bruce, at various places such as at Wayne Enterprises and at his house. At this point in the movie he was just a stalking sociopath, but when he saw Two-Face's little visit to the circus, he was inspired and became the Riddler. And then showed up at Two-Face's hideout and proposed that if Two-Face helped him to get capital to start a company that would crush Wayne Enterprises, in return he would help him find out who Batman was. After Nygma got his company, he distributed his mind thingy boxes to every household in Gotham, and then tricked Bruce Wayne into using his machine, which would read Bruce Wayne's mind, thus revealing his identity to Two-Face and the Riddler. The Riddler and Two-Face use this information to storm Wayne Manor, destroy the Batcave, and knock out Alfred, who is still played by Michael Gough, and honestly, it's just him and Gordon that maintain a connection with the two Burton films. Everything else is so different that it might as well have been a reboot. And finally, kidnap Dr. Chase Meridian, who is Bruce Wayne's love interest, played by Nicole Kidman. And I felt that this character was mostly pointless. All she did was comment on a few bad dreams Bruce had been having, and then get caught.
Batman will come for me.
And she isn't even that interesting, especially when you compare her to the leading female characters of the two Burton movies. The Riddler uses his mind box devices to feed off of the intellect of the citizens of Gotham, to make himself smarter. But Batman destroys the cut-off mechanism and he is overloaded with information which drives him to insanity. So much so that he becomes a babbling moron in Arkham Asylum, and therefore can't remember that Bruce Wayne is Batman. I have to say that the interior of this Arkham Asylum that we briefly see does make me think back to the two Burton movies, and it fits in so perfectly, which I suppose was the idea because that doctor there is named Dr. Burton, which is a reference to Tim Burton. Robin gets his confrontation with Two-Face and was determined to kill him, but when the moment finally came he decided not to, and that he would turn him in instead, which of course gets him captured by Two-Face. But after dealing with the Riddler, Batman is able to save both Robin and Dr. Meridian, only leaving Two-Face to deal with. And honestly, I love how Batman defeats Two-Face. As he is flipping his coin to see whether to kill them or not, Batman throws a whole bunch of coins into the air, which, because Two-Face can't see his coin anymore, he panics and falls down to his death. Oh no! Batman killed! I suppose I better address this! Again! For the third time! I don't care that Batman kills in his movies because it works for the movies. So, that's it. Issue addressed. Moving on. All in all, this movie is laughably bad. It does have some genuinely good moments, but you really have to look for some of them. It has decent action, decent set designs, and the cast look like they're all having a lot of fun making this movie. The main problem with this movie was that it feels torn between being goofy and being serious. And both of those can make very good movies on their own, but when you put them together you just get, well, Batman Forever. So I suppose you could say my verdict is that on one hand this movie is good, and on the other, it's bad. See you next time.